This is Jasmine Burrows, and I'm going to be discussing organizational design within the management function. There are four objectives. The first is to discuss the four predominant theories of management. I'm going to explain important concepts and functions of management, and outline the organizational structure, and then have some key terms regarding the skills, activities, and roles of managers that I'm going to define. So here's a list of the common managerial functions. They can be grouped in three basic categories of interpersonal relationships, information processing, and decision making, and then further divided into 10 working roles. And this chapter is going to discuss the function and roles of managerial work with a focus on specifically planning and organizing. So there are four theories of management. There's the classical or traditional theory, then the human relations theory, the management science or operations research theory, and then the modern or systems approach. And I'm going to discuss each theory in greater detail in the next couple of slides. So let's start with the classical or traditional theory. The classical theory is also called the traditional theory, and it originated in the late 1800s to early 1900s. And the pioneers whose ideas were incorporated in this theory include Henry Fayol and Max Weber. And the basic principles surrounding the classical theory are that 1, there is one best way to do a job. 2, there is one best way to put an organization together. And then 3, the organization should be arranged in a rational and impersonal manner. So Henry Fayol is known for his 14 principles of management, which are all listed here. And these principles highlight key concepts in traditional management. I'm going to touch on 5 of these principles that I think are really important. The first is division of work. And this principle essentially states that when employees are specialized to where each has its own specific delegated task, output can increase because they become increasingly skilled and efficient at what they do. The next is unity of command, and this says that employees should have only one direct supervisor. After that, we're going to look at unity of direction, and this is similar to unity of command, where teams with the same objective should be working under the direction of one manager using one plan. Looking at scalar chain, this applies to the hierarchy or the chain of command within an organization. So in scalar chain, authority and responsibility flow in a direct line vertically from the highest level of organization to the lowest. And lastly, esprit de corps is translated to mean that managers should strive to promote team spirit of unity and harmony among the employees. So overall, the classical theory of management focuses on tasks, structure, and authority, and so it generally applies to basic managerial problems. The major critiques about the classical theory are that it doesn't address the unique differences in people and organizations, and it assumes economic rewards as a motivation for both people and the organization, and that's not always the case. So next we'll look at the human relations theory. And the human relations theory of management evolved during the 1920s through the 1950s, and it introduced behavioral sciences to organizational theory. So this theory emerged from the efforts to compensate for the lack of individualism that we saw in the classical theory. And so human relations theory ultimately acknowledges that workers align themselves into social groups within the framework of the formal organization, and accordingly, employee participation in management and planning and decision making yields positive effects on morale and productivity within the organization. And Elton Mayo conducted the Hawthorne studies, and he found that productivity increased due to relationships and being part of a supportive group where each employee's work had a significant effect on the team output. And afterwards, Abraham Maslow and Douglas McGregor, they revealed how motivational theory also fits in with human relations and management. So Maslow suggested that there are 5 basic needs, and they're safety, love, esteem, physiological needs, and self-actualization. And these are motivating factors because the employee is motivated to ensure the most important of these needs is met. And then McGregor stated that by realizing employees contribute more to the organization, they in turn feel responsible and valued. And in turn, the results of these behavioral sciences studies show that people want to have a sense of belonging and significance while being treated with value and respect, and therefore productivity and quality increases to support the organizational needs. For the management science and operations research theories, these were developed in the early 20th century, and they combine ideas from the classical and the human relations theories. So this theory seeks to improve an organization's efficiency by systematically improving the efficiency of task completion. So efficiency and effectiveness of business operations are improved by utilizing scientific, engineering, and quantitative analysis. So this theory is used primarily in industrial business operations because the main goals are to reduce waste, increase the process and methods of production, and create a just distribution of goods. So there's a lot of math involved with this theory. And the founding father of scientific management is Frederick Taylor. He was an American inventor and engineer. He systematically studied people, tasks, and work behavior and broke the work process down into the smallest possible units or subtasks in an effort to determine the most efficient method possible for completing a particular job. So his method consisted of testing the completion of various tasks to determine the optimal amount of work that could be accomplished within a certain period of time. And the resulting scientific management theory suggests that organizations should identify the best way to do a job, then train the workers to handle each element in a predetermined manner instead of basing their work on their own personal discretion, and then set up an equitable system of rewards for improved productivity. And then other pioneers, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, they also made contributions to the theory through continuing those same time and motion studies that Taylor started, with the belief that they could find the best way to perform each task that's studied. The modern systems approach started after the 1950s and is comprised of the systems, contingency, and chaos theories. And the complex nature of today's organizations has caused an integration and evolution of ideas from the classical human relations and management science to form this grouping of the modern theories. These theories recognize the complexities of organizations and people with differing motives, needs, aspirations, and potentials, which is lacking in the former theories. The systems approach theory treats the organization as a fluid and dynamic entity made up of inputs, processes, outputs, outcomes, and feedback loops that all interact with each other. This theory is based on the concepts of holism and interdependence, where the whole of an entity is greater than the sum of its parts, and a change in one part of the system will affect the whole system in its entirety. And treating the organization as a system helps managers to view the organization from a broader perspective and recognize how various parts of the organization interact. For the contingency theory, this is based on the belief that activity should be adjusted to fit the situation. Therefore, factors within the organization such as size, workforce, and goals of the organization should dictate the managerial approach that's used. Important principles in this approach are that individual motivation may be influenced by factors in the environment. Managers must adjust their leadership behavior to fit the particular situation, and that the structure of the organization must be designed to fit the organization environment and the technology it uses. The chaos theory illustrates the complex and unpredictable dynamics of systems and recognizes that organizational events are rarely controlled, such as it seems in the systems theory. Therefore, managers should work with and not against the non-linearity of the process. And theorists of the chaos theory suggest that systems, or as they become more complex, they also become more chaotic and must expend more energy to maintain structure and stability. Let's move on to looking at organizational structure. Organizational structure refers to the way work and responsibilities are divided within an organization as to provide structure and not duplicate efforts. Certain steps are necessary in developing an organization's framework. They include determining and defining the organization's objectives or purpose, analyzing and classifying work to be done, and this can be accomplished by dividing the total work necessary to accomplish the organization's goals into major parts and similar activities, and then further breaking them down into smaller classifications. The next step is to describe the work or activity in terms of the employee in the form of a job description. And finally, one will need to determine and specify the relationship of the workers to each other and to management. And this will outline the responsibility and authority within each level of the organization or individual department. Responsibility and authority within an organization may be structured using line and or staff authority relationships. So with line authority, there are clearly drawn lines of authority where individuals are responsible to those directly above them. The advantages of this is that there's a clear understanding of authority because you report to the person directly above you. There's expedient decision making, and there's direct placement of responsibility. Disadvantages include the fact that there's too much detail for those at the top to be overlooking everything that's going on at the bottom. So this limits the time that is available for planning and research for growth and development. Here is an example of line authority where each individual reports to the person directly above him or her, with the CEO in this example being the top ranking member with authority. So there's also staff authority, and staff authority is used when line authority is no longer adequate to cope with the many responsibilities demanded of the person at the top. This is generally seen as organizations grow or expand and get bigger. So with staff authority, there are staff specialists that are used for advisory purposes to help those at the top. The advantages of this are that it provides advisory assistance for those at the top when they're overloaded, but there's also disadvantages that it may cause friction between staff personnel and other lines of authority, i.e. managers. Here is a visual of line authority in addition to staff authority. You can see that line authority is represented by the solid arrow, and then staff authority is represented by the dashed arrow. And the book also discusses a third type of authority called functional authority, and this may exist in larger organizations where a staff specialist has limited responsibilities over a segment or individual, i.e. if a president or vice president was responsible for purchasing or quality control, then that would be defined as functional authority. Next, we're going to just go through some key terms, and I've listed the key terms here, and I'm going to define them. So to start, a mission statement is the summary of an organization's purpose, customers, product, and service, while a vision statement is the organization's view of the future. Both the mission and the vision statement are essential to the planning process. And talking about strategic management, this is a system of management that requires balancing demands imposed by external and internal forces with the overall functioning of the organization and using resources in a manner that meets goals and satisfies values. This requires that managers steer the organization through strategic change under conditions of complexity and uncertainty. Strategic management involves 5 steps. First one is identification of fundamental values of the organization or its goals and objectives. The second one is an assessment of the organization's external environment, its opportunities or threats. The third is the assessment of the organization's resources and capabilities, which are the inputs and outputs. Then there's the identification or formation of the organization's components or processes. And then finally, there's the development of the management and decision-making structure. And those are the 5 steps of strategic management. For interdependence, we discussed this prior when we were talking about the systems theory. And this is a key concept in the systems theory where elements or pieces that make up a system interact with one another, where if there's a change to one part of the system, the whole system is affected. So with planning, planning is a function of management that involves developing in broad outline the activities required to accomplish the objectives of the organization and the most effective ways of doing so. With strategic planning, this is decision making based on environmental conditions, competition, forecasts, and resources available. This strategic plans evolve from analysis of the organization's competitive advantages, threats from their competitors, environmental forces, customer demands, and how well the goals of the organization are being met. And a strategic plan may have the following components. There could be a statement of purpose, mission, goals, and objectives, and the measures that are used to evaluate performance. And there's a definition of the desired future, including a statement of identity. There's a description of the competitive advantage of the company, and a statement of proposed resource allocation to allow for implementation of the plan. So moving on to operation plans, these specify the procedures to be used, the schedule to be followed, and the budget to stay within for the current period of time. And they are designed to provide the framework for the strategic and intermediate plans at the department level. Speaking of intermediate plans, these are based on the strategic planning document and begin with the development of policies covering a period of 1 to 3 years. The standing plans are policies and procedures in an organization that do not change over time, so they're fixed. We also have the SOP, also known as the Standard Operating Procedures. And these are detailed guidelines for planned activities that occur regularly. And as before, we discussed line authority, where individuals are responsible to those directly above them, and functional authority, which exists when an individual delegates limited authority over a specified segment of activities to another person, i.e. that vice president having secondary responsibilities such as purchasing. So here are some essential managerial skills. There are 3 types of skills that managers need. The first is technical skills, and these skills allow a worker to perform specialized activities. Human skills, which are understanding and motivating individuals and groups. And then conceptual skills, which are understanding and integrating all the activities and interests of the organization towards a common objective. So technical skills tend to be more important for lower level managers because lower level managers typically manage employees who use tools and techniques to produce the organization's products and services. So an example of technical skills would be knowledge of tools and specific techniques. Human skills are equally important at all levels of management because all managers must deal directly with people. So a human skill would be the ability to communicate well and motivate others. Conceptual skills are most important at the top levels of management. Managers at the top levels must conceptually see the organization as a whole and understand the relationships among various subunits and how to visualize how the organization fits into its broader environment. So a conceptual skill needed would be the ability to effectively solve problems and plan strategic decisions. Lastly, we're going to briefly touch on a job description and how it differs from a job specification. So a job description shows the activities and job responsibilities for the positions identified in the organization. They are used for matching qualified applicants to the job, for orientation and training, performance appraisals, establishing rates of pay, and defining limits of authority and responsibility. Most job descriptions are written in either narrative or outline form and include identifying information, a job summary, and specific duties and requirements. And here we have a job description, a sample of a job description, and it has the list of duties, the skills, and responsibilities of the position that you can see. Now, a job specification is a written statement of the minimum standards that must be met by an applicant for a particular job. This is not the same as a job description. So it covers the duties of the job, the working conditions, and personal qualifications required of the worker needed for the job. And as you can see from the sample, there's the description, the experience, and the education, and these are just the minimum standards that must be met, which is not the same as a job description. In summary, contributions of classical human relations and management science have evolved to modern day theories. Managers utilize technical, human, and conceptual skills to motivate and unify employees for increased productivity and efficiency. And then planning and organizing are essential managerial concepts needed to appropriately structure and outline organizational activities. Here I've listed some references, and I hope this presentation has been helpful in you understanding the organizational design within the management function.